What's up, guys? Welcome back. Today we have the Marfione Custom Annex. If you're looking at this and thinking, oh, that looks like the Microtech Annex. Well, it is, but it's actually the one made by Tony Marfione himself. So if you're unfamiliar with Tony Marfione, he's a guy that started Microtech, and a lot of his models that he makes with Microtech he made customs for at one point or still does. The Annex is a model that he does not make any more customs of, I don't believe. But he was making these right before he released them for Microtech. So this is not a Microtech, but it kind of is. It's a Microtech that's handmade by Tony Marfione. So I just wanted to do a quick review of this, and I'm going to use my new EDC rating scale. I'm going to tell you right now that this does not score super well, and that's totally fine. I enjoy carrying it, and that kind of proves the point of my EDC scale, that it is purely for, I don't know, it's purely numbers, right? At the end of the day, if we were all just 100% practical, we'd carry a Milwaukee Fastback with a swappable blade. But we're knife collectors, so we're not always going to carry something practical. So let's get right into this knife. First thing you will notice is the blade. This is a Elmax Damascus blade. I've been calling it Elmascus. So it's at least one part Elmax. I don't know what the other material is in there, but it is absolutely gorgeous. Pretty good etch on there. Not super deep like some of the other Damascuses, but definitely on the deeper side. I think it looks fantastic. And honestly, for a Damascus blade, it holds up really well. I do use this. I do carry it. Obviously, I've talked about this before. Use the right tool for the job, so I'm not doing really heavy duty stuff with this. The next thing you will notice that this is an integral. So if you're not familiar with an integral, a normal, titanium frame lock knife is two pieces of titanium sandwiched together. Here, I'll show you. Here's a Todd Fisher launch, and then you have a backspacer, right? So that's two pieces, and then you mate them with some sort of standoffs or a backspacer and screw them together. And this is one piece all milled out. So that comes with a bunch of challenges in the making process. First of all, milling out the center piece is much more challenging because you don't have access to the inside of it. You have to mill it out vertically. So obviously that's more challenging, but the other really difficult piece is that means if you screw up, this big slab of titanium is done. If TJ Fisher, Todd Jr. had screwed up one of these scales, he could just make another one. You wouldn't have to scrap the whole knife, right? With this, if you screw up, you're kind of done with that whole slab of titanium, so you have to get rid of it. Then obviously the other difficult part is since you can't access the inside, you have to figure out some sort of pivot mechanism that can be slid in around the blade. And we'll get into that a little more later when I get to the ranking. So that just, is another difficult thing. Usually what that means is you put pockets on the blade so you can slide with a perfect fit, either bushings or some captured bearings or washers in around the blade. Very difficult, but absolutely beautiful because you just get this seamless construction. There you can see Marfione's logo. Apparently, I learned this from Dirk because Dirk had this knife. I lent it to him. This is like a little threaded spot for like a glass breaker that came out of that. That's pretty interesting. something you will notice about this integral as opposed to others, which was actually a smart move, is that the lock bar is actually a separate piece. So the lock bar is attached to the handle via hardware, and what that means is there's a little bit less of the ability to ruin the handle, right? The problem with integrals when they're sent to people to use them, if you are to, really overextend this lock bar, and like somehow cause a weakness in the titanium, God forbid, snap the titanium, that handle's done. The knife is done. You're just left with a blade. So having a separate piece for a lock bar, I think probably was just like a pragmatic thing to do for this knife, and I think that was brilliant of Tony Marfione to do. Obviously, this knife is blued titanium. I think it looks great. It's got that gold and blue. I think it's just lovely. And then it has a classic ball bearing pocket clip, which is really functional. I enjoy using that. I think it has good retention and goes into the pocket easily. The contouring for this handle, there is contouring, which is really cool. So it gets thicker back here and then kicks in. You can kind of see it. It's not contoured, this way, but it is contoured this way. So what that means is when you're carrying the knife, you feel like it fills the back of your hand. Just really cool detail. This is a really well-made knife. And then if you look at that stop pin, I think that's a sweet detail, how it kicks out like that. I just think that looks fantastic, and the jimping around it, and it is functional jimping on the back of the blade too. I think it feels really nice, and this ergonomically and usability, shape, this is a really nice knife. I actually really enjoy carrying it, and I don't carry. This is the only Damascene steel knife actually that I have. Because I don't like to use Damascus blades because I feel like I'm going to hurt them, whether that's true or not. So we also need to talk about the action. This is primarily a Spidey flick knife. I do the weird double flick with this one. You can do a single, but when a knife has like a long fuller like this, I like to use 2 fingers to flick it open, and it really comes out quickly. You will also notice that this has a front flipper, which I really appreciate. I like a front flipper. It's not a particularly good front flipper, but this knife is actually from 2014, and you can see that it's dated on the inside. You probably can't read it, but in the inside there, it is dated. There we go. 2014 Annex. Marfione. Says one other thing. 11/20/14. So November 2014 Marfione Annex. Yeah. That's pretty cool. I wonder what tool he used to etch that. Maybe like a really long Dremel. I don't know. It looks like a perfect font. So yeah, so that's kind of the overview of the knife. Now I want to get into my rating system that I've been using in the last few videos, just to talk about kind of the general EDC ability of this knife. So first off, we have carryability. So this is quite a carryable knife. I gave it a 6, a little bit more carryable than average probably, and that's because it's got a really good pocket spacer. It didn't get better than a 6, and I even hesitate to give it a 6. It'd be between a 5 and a 6. So I'll call it a 6 because the pocket clip is really good, but and it's not particularly bad, but it's pretty wide. It weighs over 5 ounces, so it's not like a light knife to carry, but it's pretty tall this way, so it doesn't disappear into the pocket by any means. So I think that is pretty straightforward as to why it is a little bit better than average, but not great, if that makes sense, for that 6. So carryability is a 6. Next up, I have usability. I wanted to give this a higher rating. I can't in good conscience give this anything above average when it's a Damascus blade. So usability for me, I haven't really explained these scales, but they just have kind of give numbers and then little quips from them. Usability is like how, usable it is as a EDC, and that, takes into account a lot of things, including, ergonomics and blade steel even, or blade shape. So it's got a really usable blade shape. Its ergos are good, but it's Damascus. I know there are lots of people out there that carry and use Damascus regularly, but as a functional piece of steel, it is less functional than a plain blade, right? Just in durability. And yes, it can be, a MagnaCut core or MagnaCut whatever, twist Damascus, or in this case, LMAX core, or not core, LMAX Damascus. But there is always a second steel in those things that etches. That's how, Damascus works. It's two steels. One is softer than the other or more prone to acid than the other, and it's etched out. So any type of two materials making a blade is, unequivocally adding the potential for weakness somewhere. Because when you have a homogeneous blade, what you have is a homogeneous structure in the blade, right? And what that means is it's strong throughout, unless there were cracks within the billet, right? The problem with having Damascus as a EDC steel, whatever the compound is that inevitably you are increasing the ability to fail, because the structure itself is not homogeneous. It's two structures bonded together. So for every tiny fold within there where you see the color difference, there is the possibility that that is not completely bonded properly, and it will, separate slightly. So essentially what I'm saying is that for me personally, because of the durability concerns, I can't really ever give anything that's a Damasteel blade a higher than a 5, because at best it behaves like an average knife. It doesn't overperform, if that makes sense, because there is always a possibility of some sort of failure that is non-existent in a homogeneous steeled knife. That's a whole discussion. If you disagree with me adamantly, please let me know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But for me, on the scale, even though this is a good EDC shape blade and pretty good ergos and things like that, it can't be rated higher than a 5 in my brain. So that's usability, carryability, usability, and then the last we have is maintainability. So again, I said that at the beginning of this video that this knife wasn't going to score great, and this is where it really doesn't score great. Maintainability, it has to have a 2. So, and the reason it even got to the 2 instead of a 1 is because of the blade steel, the blade shape. This would be easy to sharpen. I have not. And the fact that Anthony Marfione added this, separate piece lock bar. But look, at the end of the day, this is a integral. So getting inside of it is not easy, or is not possible, right? And therefore, any serious issue with the handle, you can't fiddle with it. It's one piece. And granted, with the solid back piece, you're gonna get less gunk in there. So yeah, but just having an integral, even though it's cool, it is less useful because one thing goes wrong and it's toast, right? I don't know if that makes sense. Like it's not like we're damaging our handles or whatever, but you can't get in there to clean out the inside. It's if you overextend the lock bar, yes, with this one, you could get a replacement lock bar, but that's, I don't even know how possible that would be because he doesn't make this model anymore. I don't know if you could hit up Anthony or Mr. Marfione and be like, yo, can I get a new lock bar for my Annex? And especially with this, pattern, I'm like, oh, I want it to match the pattern. Yeah, good luck. Because obviously this was from the same piece of titanium. He just cuts this out so it can be taken in and out. So it's not a maintainable knife. And then the other thing, I've talked about this before on many other of my knives, it has all proprietary hardware. This is a classic safety bit, and these might be too, but they are basically proprietary. So integral proprietary hardware, and then a good blade shape, but like I said a minute ago, in the usability, it's Damascus. So sharpening this is fine, but sharpening Damascus is a different experience from what I've read. It just depends on where you are in the folds, and it can sharpen really funky. It's harder to sharpen consistently, like get a consistent edge all the way up the bevel. This is nice and sharp, but then you're also worried about clamping this potentially. I mean, there's a lot that goes into that. So the maintainability of a Damascus blade, and then an integral, and then it has, proprietary hardware essentially. I can't in good conscience give this anything above a 2, and it got bonus points because it's maintainable for a integral. It's a qualification that doesn't mean it's easy to maintain. So this is really not a very easy to maintain knife, and therefore, won't score high on this, EDC scale. So the total for that would give it a 13. So with a carryability of 6, usability of 5, and a maintainability of 2, it's not a great EDC knife. Like, it's not something that you should recommend to everybody. Does that mean I don't carry it? No, absolutely not. I really like carrying this knife. It's a joy to have. Sorry, I bumped the camera. It's a joy to have in my pocket. I love looking at it. I love using it. But I am careful with it. At the end of the day, it's a rare piece. It's a beautiful piece. And when I use it, I'm careful with it. And I'm careful with all my knives in the sense of I don't use them what they're not used for. Like, don't pry with your knives. Don't use them as screwdrivers, blah, blah, blah. But this one I'm extra careful with because it's not maintainable, really. I could clean it. I don't want to take this apart. And it's just one of those things that, it's a collector's item that I do use, but it's not a great EDC for the things that I just said. But again, I love carrying it. And if you see a video of a knife that you have and I give it a poor score, who cares? If someone says to you, oh my gosh, I can't believe you carry X, Y, or Z, and you feel bad about that, don't. I mean, it's silly. Do what makes you happy. Carrying this makes me happy. I'm going to go a little bit backwards here. I did bring out some things to compare the size of this. People say that they appreciate that, and I just kind of jumped right into it. So I brought out some non-standard things as well, or standard but not what I usually carry. So there it is next to a Paramilitary 2. This is a good size knife. This is a full size knife for sure. Here it is next to a Strider SMG. And then a Sebenza 31, large Sebenza 31. So yeah, this is a full-size knife, and that's one of the reasons I actually enjoy carrying it. I like big knives, and this is just like that sweet spot between 3.5 and 4 inches. I think ideally I like carrying a knife that's over 3.5 and under 4 inches. A 4-inch knife always feels huge to me. I do carry them. I just made that video about the Shiro 111, the new one, and I like carrying that knife, but it does get to a point where it detracts from the usability of the knife, to me personally, and so this is the sweet spot where it's a really usable size. So that's the Marfione Annex, a custom Annex. This is, this is the prettiest knife in my collection, in my opinion. I just think it's beautiful. And it's cool that it's made by the guy that started Microtech, Anthony Marfione. That's a cool piece of history. It's an excellent piece of craftsmanship. It's got a really good action. It turned 11, or actually no, it turned 10 just in November this year, so it's cool to have an older piece. From the looks of it, I'm the first person to have carried it who owned it. I might be wrong, but it's basically spotless, and I've carried it. And so any marks on it when I got it probably are from me, or there were no marks on it when I got it, so any marks on it now are probably from me. So I'm enjoying owning this. I like carrying it, even though it scores poorly. Let me know what you think of this beautiful knife. I'm happy that I got to share it with you. And thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the next one.